folks, it's Ranger Billy, and here we are at part 3. So the first week, part 1, we talked about Coquina, how it was formed when I was a little kid and all that kind of stuff, right? Then part 2 was last week, and we talked about how the Coquina went from the old Spanish Quarry over to the Castillo de San Marco. This week, we're going to be talking about history timeline, and we're also going to be talking about the human impact and just exactly what that meant for this area. So let's get right into it. So of course, we know with history timeline, we're going to go all the way back 1.8 million years to when I was a little kid, and that was the Pleistocene period. And there we go, the Pleistocene period where Coquina was formed during 10,000 years to 1.8 million years ago. So then the next time, we're going to jump way ahead. And a couple little things happened before our next little slide. So you had Ponce de Leon finds Florida in 1565, and then they build 9 wooden forts. We talked about that last week, right? Then we go in, and a guy named Pedro Menendez Marquez, he discovers Coquina. What year did he discover Coquina? It was in, that's right, 1583. So 1583, he discovers Coquina. There's a beautiful little Coquina Rock right there. And that sets off the whole thing. The next thing, we move into 1598, where they actually build a Coquina powder magazine, right? So they build this powder magazine, and you know, the big joke I always say is they powder their face while reading the magazine, and that's not what it is, right? So basically what a powder magazine is that's where they store black powder. In the old days, they used wood. In Florida, you know how the humidity is, so that would actually make the black powder get wet, and then it's just basically useless. So they built this Coquina powder magazine, and they figured that this would actually keep it cooler, and it did. It kept the gunpowder cooler. It also was actually a good way to keep it stored without it getting damaged too. So then now we jump ahead, and the governor of Florida in 1668 was Governor Francisco de la Guerra, okay? Now, he actually petitions Queen Mariana, and there she is. How do you like that hair, huh? Anyway, that's an actual painting of Queen Mariana of Spain. So he petitions her to get money to start building a Coquina structure, all right? And so now we move ahead. A year goes by. Now we're going to talk a little bit quickly before I jump into the next slide about Queen Mariana, because she's pretty cool. See, Queen Mariana is actually Austrian. And you know, if you jump back in those days, they actually intermarried for, you know, peace treaties or trade. So they intermarried. She's now in Spain. She marries King Philip of Spain, right? They end up having a child. His name is Charles. Now, at the age of 6, when Charles is the age of 6, King Philip dies. Very sad, yes. And so now he has to be King Charles. He's the next in line to take on to be the King of Spain. So he cannot be the King of Spain at 6 years old. I have a child. He's 11 years old. He can't even be the King of Spain at 11. So imagine a 6-year-old. And then secondly, King Charles also had a disability where his tongue was too big and he couldn't talk. So what they did was basically all the big people in Spain, they did a vote, and they made Mariana Queen Regent of Spain, and she was the one that took care of all the affairs of Spain. So now let's move to 1669. It was a great year. They had Woodstock going on and all these great things. Just joking. But if you see her hair, I mean, you could kind of see that. But anyway, so Queen Mariana, she designates the money for the fort. But you know, we have to jump back just a little bit, because I forgot to tell you how it sounded when Governor Sandoya actually asked for the funds. So he said, "I, Governor Francisco de la Guerra, do hereby request that a stone structure be placed in St. Augustine to repel any and all enemies of Spain. Please hear my request, Queen Regent Mariana. So she designates the money in 1669. So I'm going to invite my really good friend, Mary Mosaic, our park service specialist, back to actually let us hear how that kind of sounded. Come on back, Mary.
All right.
Everybody say hi, Mary. All right. Go ahead,
Okay.
Mary. How'd it sound?
So, I, Queen Regent Mariana, hereby designate funds to build the Castillo de San Marco.
Your queen, we thank you. All right. So she designates the funds, but by that time, Francisco de la Guerra is no longer the governor. Now there's Sergeant Major Sendoya. He is now the governor. He asks for 30,000 pesos, only gets, 30,000 pesos, only gets 12,000 to start the construction, okay? So now, in 1671, the funds arrive, and we have the blacksmiths start making tools, the carpenters, and we all talked about that last week. And that happens in 1671. Everything gets moving, and that fort gets started. Ground actually starts getting broken. Actually gets broken at the fort on October 2nd, 1672. And this is why I like Governor Sendoya, because basically what I read was he comes out, and you know how CEOs are. They come out with all their gold spades, and they're in front of media, and they're like, hey, look at me. I'm the big rich guy that has lots of money that paid for this area, and I'm going to break ground. Ha ha, look at me, right? Well, Sendoya, he just comes out with a spade. He sticks it in the ground. He's just in front of a few of the townspeople and a scribe, and just basically says this ground is for Spain and it's for the Castillo de San Marco, right? And then he walks off. And that's at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday on October 2nd, 1672. Now we jump a little bit more than a month later on November 9th, 1672. Mary, what happens? There it is. The cornerstone is laid. So the cornerstone is laid, and they're actually ready to start building this building. You know, and then it takes so many years. It takes 23 years to build this building. So when did they finish this project? They finished this project in 1695. You guys are really good at math. You already had that before we put it out, didn't we? So construction's completed 1695, and they it's been so many years that part of it's gray and part of it's still tan from, the different amount of years that went by. So, the bottom half of it's weathered, and the other part of it's tan because it's brand new. And it took 23 years. Well, why did it take 23 years, my friends? I'm going to say this is the reason why, and this is what I've read. There was just so much going on. You had mosquitoes here. You know how the mosquitoes are here in Florida. You know how, sickness. Back then they didn't have penicillin. So people were sick. They got sick. If they rubbed their leg against something, they would get an infection. So, people were sick. It just took a really long time for them to deal with it. And then funds were low. I mean, there were several times where they ran out of money. And they actually, at one time, they actually had to summon a Dutch ship, which was actually treason because the Spain were arch enemies of the Dutch at that time. And they had to trade to get food from that Dutch ship. So now the construction's completed. The only time after that, there was 2 times that the fort was raided after that. The first time was in 1702. The British actually raided, and that's the closest to the construction. 7 years later, 1702, the British raided. They don't capture the fort. And then in 1740, of course, leading into the Battle of Bloody Mosaic, they try once again. General Oglethorpe tries to again ransack the fort and can't get through. And there's the history of the fort. My friends, it is an amazing story. It's a story of love. It's a story of anguish too. And if you think about what we're going through in this time right now, we're dealing with a lot of difficult things in life. But we have done that for years and years and years. Humanity has always dealt with difficult things. So my friends, I say hang in there. Think about the story of the Castillo de San Marco, how they took the stone out of the quarry and they made this magnificent fort, and all the difficulties that they had to go through to make that happen. And just think about, what we have to do to deal with the difficulties that we go through in life. And you know what? We're going to come out really good on the other side. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all come back to the park. Keep an eye on Anastasia State Park Facebook page, because there's going to be a lot of different programming coming up, some wildlife videos coming up, and it's going to be amazing. And we will see you guys virtually in your living room coming up real soon, and we'll see you here in the park real soon. Have a wonderful day.